Welcome into another edition of the Going Deep Buffalo podcast. This is your host, Kevin Syracuse, alongside Pat Bruknis, who is riding passenger seat right now for the time being. We got Kevin Massare coming on in about 20 minutes. We also have a guest from Detroit coming on to talk about the Lions game. But Pat, first of all, we need to talk about this Rams game because I know it's Wednesday. We're looking forward to this Lions game. It's a huge matchup, another potential game of the year. But we definitely need to talk about what happened this past weekend because I'll just say it right now. I'll start with this. It's not the fact that the Bills lost, it's how they lost that's not sitting well with me. So before I say anything else, how do you feel about what transpired this past weekend?
Well, I'm kind of with you. I don't care that they lost because we have already clinched the division, but it's how they lost. On the defensive side, how we just could not get more than one stop is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you score 42 points, you would like to think that you should win an NFL game. But on the flip side, if you give up 44 points, you're probably not going to win a game. So it's just so infuriating when Josh Allen and the offense, I mean, specifically Josh, because he just put the cape on once again, and he did pretty much everything humanly possible to go get that dub. And this is where I have my problems because I tweeted after the game, I said, this game felt like a microcosm of what we've seen in the playoffs over the last few years, where Josh Allen absolutely balls out, puts up just these eye-popping numbers. I mean, he's the first quarterback in NFL history to have 3+ passing touchdowns and 3+ rushing touchdowns in the same game. He set the fantasy record with 52 fantasy points, and actually in some leagues, it stretched to 62 points, I saw, depending on what league you're in and how they accumulate the points. But the numbers that he was able to put up was just absolutely mind-boggling. But again, you're seeing the fact that poor coaching, poor defense, and poor special teams are letting this team down. And if it was just any ordinary game, I'd say that's fine. The Bills already clinched the division. They're 10-3. Just regroup. It was okay. The first loss since October 6th. Sometimes you need a loss to kind of reset your mind, right? And regroup and recalibrate. But this one's concerning for me because we've seen this time and time again, specifically with Sean McDermott. And a lot of people have been saying that. And look, I'll just say right now, this is not us sitting here tonight saying, oh, Sean McDermott needs to get fired. I mean, he is a long way from getting fired. Maybe after the season, we can have some conversations, but I'm a long way from getting to that point because if you look, I mean, just last week when they beat San Francisco, everyone was talking about how dominant this team is. And, we were talking about how great of a win it is and how McDermott is the winningest coach in Bills history and even an all-time too, because if he wins his 11th game, what's that stat? That he'll be the 5th coach all-time to have 11 wins in 5 straight seasons. I mean, just dominance in the regular season. But then you get to the postseason, and I guess that's why they say it's a whole different season, a whole different ball game, because then the defense crumbles, they get pushed around, they can't win the line of scrimmage, and then McDermott just panics under 2 minutes in those big moments.
Yeah, and you think he would learn from those mistakes because of the past experiences that we have had. But it seems like he is not learning, which I don't understand because obviously you go back and watch film. I believe it was last year, he said that he was going to watch a lot of film about what can they do better in those situations. But again, here we are this year. He was doing good in the first half of the year. Then we have that game against the Rams where there was a lot of questionable coaching mistakes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess we can just start with the last couple of minutes there. So, what was your opinion on the decision to decline that penalty to give the Rams essentially 2 opportunities? Because with their offense flying around the way it was, you just kind of had that feeling that McVay was going to go for it no matter what. So, I kind of liked my chances of 4th and 7, only having them have 1 opportunity. Maybe they do send out the field goal unit, but as soon as they put them out for 3rd and 17, I was like, uh-oh. All it takes is a chunk play here and then 4th and manageable, and look what's going to happen. And sure enough, that's what happened as Stafford completed that 11-yard pass to Parkinson, and then it was 4th and 5, and then they eventually went down and scored that touchdown with Nakua, who was just unbelievable. I mean, I didn't realize that Puka, I knew he was great, but I didn't know that he was that great. And him and Cooper Kupp together, I mean, they showed why they are one of the best dynamic duos in the league. But I guess in hindsight, it's easy to say now, oh, well, you should have just accepted that penalty. But in the moment, McDermott said, well, I like my chances with 3rd and 17 because to his credit, the defense was making some stops in that second half. They did force a punt. I believe it was the previous possession.
Yep.
If you're McDermott, you want to trust your defense, but I don't know. Where does that sit with you?
Well, for me, I kind of see where McDermott's coming from, declining the penalty. 3rd and 17. Maybe he's hoping that the Rams go somewhat deep, or they look for a chunk play and it's an incomplete pass. Then it's 4th and 17. But to your credit, that's not what happened. They got the chunk play to Kobe Parkinson, and then it was a 4th and manageable again.
Yeah, and you could look at it from the other side and say, well, what if there's an offensive holding on the Rams? Then it's 4th and 27. You know,
right?
You just don't know. So I guess that's a chance that you have to take. I saw a lot of people were saying it really didn't matter either way. I think the main call was taking that timeout with the QB sneak. I mean, that is something that you cannot have, regardless of what you think about that 4th down call and whether they should have accepted or declined it. I think the one we can all agree on is that was bad clock management in the end. And McDermott pretty much admitted to that too at his Monday press conference. He was like, yeah, that's something that we'd like to have back. We're trying to look at all angles. We're trying to balance everything. But at the end of the day, you cannot take that timeout because then you had to get the onside kick. And the probability of winning after that onside kick is way lower than being able to pull out a come from behind victory with your 3 timeouts, with your defense forcing them to punt the ball back to you and giving Josh Allen enough time to go down the field.
Yeah, no, me personally, I was not a fan of calling the timeout after the first attempt on the QB sneak. It would have probably taken off, 10 seconds, if that, to get back on the line? Because we all know Josh would have got it the second time, which he did. Even Josh knew that timeout was crucial.
So I believe there was a 1:06 left, right? About 65, 66 seconds left. They tried the sneak, didn't work. Now, McDermott was saying that it takes time to remove the pile, right? Like everyone's got to stand up and get in position. But you got to know the situation. That's where it comes down to the players, too, where as much as we want to blame McDermott, maybe, I don't want to go this far, but I think we at least need to speak on the fact that Josh Allen needs to have enough awareness in that moment to say, hey, hurry up. We can't afford the timeout here. Either I'm spiking it or we're going immediately. There was too much lollygagging going around. And maybe that's why McDermott said, okay, maybe the players don't know the situation, so I need to call the timeout to get everyone to regroup. But then you're thinking, well, you can't call a timeout. That's probably the worst thing that you could do. And one other thing that I'll say real quick is I didn't like the QB sneak in the first place because I know that it's the Bills' best play within that 5-yard line, specifically on the 1 or 2. But in that moment, if he gets stopped like he did, then you're wasting that timeout. So I would have loved to see a passing play of some sorts, maybe even a bootleg play action, roll him out, because that way he still has the option to use his legs and his arm. But you just cannot have what happened happen.
Yeah, no, you cannot have that happen. And it's unfortunate that's what happened because me personally, I like our defense's chances, even though we only got 1 stop in that game. I still feel like with 3 timeouts, we could have gotten a stop because we did get a stop in that second half. And our defense was playing better in the second half compared to the first half. We were getting them to 3rd downs, but it was just Puka Nacua on 3rd down.
Well, I mean, to your credit, they did get them to punt. The Bills got the punt with, I believe there were 7 seconds left on the clock, another 4th and 7. And then McDermott said after the game, they only had 9 players on the field. So how do you have one of the biggest moments of the game and you fall apart once again? And this is what I'm talking about here as we open up with the show. I'm okay with the loss, but these are repeated events that are going on and on for years here. And what happens when you get to that moment again in the playoffs? Because they always say, we're going to go back, we're going to evaluate, we're going to look at the tape, we're going to learn, we're going to get better. But they don't get better in this specific category. And that is very, very concerning because if you have someone like Tom Brady calling it out from the booth, to be fair, Tom Brady's probably the best quarterback of all time. But someone on that sideline has to tell McDermott or Josh Allen or Joe Brady that you cannot sneak it there and you cannot call that timeout.
No, you cannot take the timeout there. And it's unfortunate that that's what happened. It really is.
And I think I said it, but I'll say it again. I hate to give Tom Brady credit, but you got to give him credit because he was on that very, very quickly. And I saw some people were saying, at least in the first half, that they didn't like Brady's announcing. real quick, just to take a little side note here, what do you think about Tom Brady as a color commentator? Because personally, for me, even though like I'm in broadcasting and podcasting,
Right.
I think the easy answer would be like, oh, I'm going to nitpick everything. But I'm kind of the opposite, where it's like I'm there to watch the football game. I'm not trying to critique these announcers because as someone who does do it myself, I know that it's a challenging job. And I think people sit with it too long and they critique every little word. And I know sometimes they do say some stupid things, like Chris Collinsworth is always just all over Patrick Mahomes and the
Let me tell you
Chiefs and
something,
Travis
man.
Kelce. But overall, I mean, I thought Brady's been doing a fine job.
Oh yeah, so do I. I think he's doing a fine job, especially on top of that, his experience. Like in that on that QB sneak, he knows you can't call a timeout there, and that's what I really like with announcers. Guys like Greg Olsen, Tony Romo, and Tom Brady. The in-game experience that they have really does matter while announcing.
All right. Well, that being said, want to take this time to thank our sponsors for tonight's show, the Summit Center, doing some great work with autism in the Buffalo and Rochester areas, and also Dave Dengler and the Larson-Timko Funeral Home. Larson-Timko Funeral Home offering 100% fully guaranteed price and pre-arranged funeral plans with live streaming available. You can give them a call at 716-679-9000 or visit their website at larsontimkofuneralhome.com. So that being said, we talked a lot about McDermott, and then we started to get into the special teams here. Before we bring Kevin on and our Detroit guest, I think we need to talk about Matthew Smiley because
yes,
I said how McDermott's seat is not hot, at least in my opinion. I'm sure you would get the other opinions. You could find those Twitter accounts where it's like, I've been saying since day one that this isn't the right guy. So a game like that is perfect for those anti-McDermott people where it's like, I told you so. He doesn't know how to manage a clock. Get him out of here. But I think the more pressing issue is his special teams coordinator, Matthew Smiley, who I didn't realize that he's been with McDermott since he was hired in 2017. So he was the assistant special teams coordinator from 2017 to 2021. And then after 13 seconds and that debacle with Heath Farwell, he got promoted to the official full-time coordinator. So he's been the full-time special teams coordinator for going on 3 full seasons now, 2022, 23, and 24. And again, same thing that I said with McDermott. I mean, we are seeing these same mistakes pop up. I mean, look at the Denver game last year. Too many men on the field.
Yep, too many men on the field.
12 men on the field for that moment, the biggest moment of the game. And now for this moment, your last chance of trying to beat this team, you only have 9 guys out there. So where's the communication going on here?
Yeah, no, I thought overall throughout the whole game that our special teams was just bad. It felt like we were starting at the 10 and they were starting at like the 30. And on top of that, like you already said, the 12 men on the field last year, 9 men on the field this year in the biggest moment of the game. And I believe our special teams unit is ranked 29th.
Yeah, I believe that was Kevin's stat. I mean, they are just not that good of a unit. Excuse me. And we've seen Tyler Bass have his faults this year. To his credit, he's been relatively good as of late. But Reed Ferguson, you know, he's a guy that doesn't really get mentioned a lot, but he's been subpar this season. He's had a couple bad snaps. He hasn't been able to hold his blocks. I mean, did we even mention it? The punt block return for a touchdown? I don't think we even mentioned that.
No, we haven't.
We went almost 15 minutes and we didn't even mention that because that was one of the huge differences in the game.
It was. It really was. And I was shocked to see Reed Ferguson get blown up like that. To me, that was shocking. But again, that does come to the special teams coordinator. That's his responsibility as well. And it was just it's speechless. I'm speechless about it. And that's how the whole special teams unit played all day.
Would you be able to pull up the tweet that I had with the defensive stats? Because after the game, I tweeted about how you're never going to win an NFL game when your opponent has 44 points. And there were some other numbers in there that I think we need to discuss real quick. And while you do that, while you do that, I just want to say, I saw someone was saying how the Bills always lose the game of the year. It's been 5 years in a row now, from 2020 with Hail Murray, and then 2021 with 13 seconds. 2022 was the Vikings game at home. Last year was the Eagles game, and now this year the Rams game. So I don't think Heath Farwell, or not Heath Farwell, he was for 13 seconds, but I don't think that Matthew Smiley has been one of the driving forces behind all those losses, but I think he's definitely played a large part.
I definitely agree with you.
So if you notice on the tweet here, because I was talking about Josh and saying scoring 42 points while your quarterback is the first QB in NFL history to have the 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns and still losing is insane. On the other hand, you're never going to win an NFL game when your opponent has 44 points, 457 total yards. They went 11 for 15 on third downs and 5 for 6 in the red zone. And we just mentioned that punt block return for a touchdown. I mean, those are all the differences in the game right there.
It is. And I don't know if you have the stat on you, but how many of those third down conversions were Puka Nacua receptions? Because it felt like every single one.
I don't know, but he had 12 receptions for, was it 162 yards?
164, I think. Yeah, somewhere in the 160s, 12
something
catches.
Crazy.
It was, man.
Yeah, like you said, it's just kind of mind-boggling how they can look so great the week before, and then you have moments like this. Not to be fair, every team is allowed to have games like this. So again, the point that we've been trying to make all night, I don't care that they lost. It's how they lost.
Exactly, especially with the way how we looked on defense, especially with, I know you guys are going to cover it later, but the biggest game of the year, some people would say a Super Bowl preview.
Yeah.
With a very good offense. That's not the type of showing I would want to have, but if that means they're going to have that showing now and not in the playoffs, I'm totally okay with it. Because, again, we have already clinched the AFC East, and some people would call that a trap game. Kevin, would you agree with that?
Yeah, it could be. One thing I just want to say real quick is I think we were not streaming to Facebook, but I think we are on now. So if you're watching us on Facebook, we apologize for the loose connection for whatever reason that it didn't stream to Facebook, but welcome to anyone who has joined here, as we have about 350 live viewers right now. And just in a couple minutes, Kevin Massare will be joining us, as well as our Lions guest, as we will be flipping the script and talking about the 10-3 Bills versus the 12-1 Lions. But what were you saying prior to that, Pat? What was the other point you were making?
Oh, yeah, just about how some people would call this a trap game because we did just win the AFC East. That was an emotional win. Then you go all the way to the West Coast to a team that is fighting for their playoff lives. And us having a huge game this week, which would have been next week if it was last week. So it has all the signs for a trap game. And to me personally, I don't believe in trap games. I believe you should take every opponent seriously. But for the people that do believe in trap games, you would say that the Bills fell for the trap game.
You were saying this past week in Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
And not Detroit, because I would say Detroit.
Yeah, no, Detroit's not a trap game. No, the
Okay.
Rams game is the trap game.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to bring up, because the other thing that I wanted to say was that I underestimated this Rams team. When we had that clip that came out last week, my score prediction was 37-16. I thought, Josh Allen has fared very well in SoFi Stadium. I thought he was going to continue that dominance. And I just thought that you could wear out that 28th ranked run defense. And once you can win at the line of scrimmage and tire out that defensive line, that's when you can spread it out with Josh Allen's arm and get your receivers involved. And Josh Allen kind of spread it out regardless, but they never got the run game established. James Cook had 6 rushes for 20 yards. Ray Davis didn't even have a touch in that game.
He didn't?
No.
No, that's shocking. Wow.
Yes.
I would have thought for sure this would have been the game. In the first quarter when James Cook couldn't get it going, I'm like, okay, it's going to be the Ray Davis and Ty Johnson game. But now that I think about it, you're right. I didn't see Ray Davis at all. Which is shocking.
I mean, Josh led the rushing attack with 10 rushes for 82 yards and his 3 touchdowns. But after that, I mean, they were far and few between. And the other point that I want to bring up, speaking of Ray Davis not getting any touches, we have a comment here from Joe. He says the Lions run game is going to shred. Now, everyone knows they have that dynamic duo between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. The thing that I wanted to ask you before we get into our Lions talk here, Pat, what do you think about Dorian Williams getting some more snaps? Because this is a point that I brought up on Twitter and I saw other people were, including Chris Trapasso. And I think that we need to see more of Dorian on the field, because I know he's not the best linebacker, specifically on passing downs. But I also know that Matt Milano isn't playing like a top 5 linebacker like we know he can right now. So I'm not saying that you need to bench Milano, but I think that Dorian warrants more than 0 snaps per game. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you, but I'm of the side of Matt Milano hasn't played a football game in over a year and a half. it is going to take him some time to get his footing underneath him. And McDermott did say that he did look a little bit better. And me personally, we already clinched the AFC East, so I'm going to give Matt Milano all the playing time he needs. And even if he does have to come out the field for a few plays, then sure, let Dorian Williams come in. But again, I would let Matt Milano play because, again, we already did clinch the AFC East, and he does need that playing time to get his footing from underneath him.
Yeah, and I understand that perspective, but I just think that if you are struggling specifically against a run, and Dorian Williams was one of the top tacklers in the whole league, I think that, not that this is a fairness thing where it's, because I saw some people were saying, well, how do you think he feels? He just got replaced by Matt Milano, and he was one of the top tacklers in the league. He's got to be so mad at McDermott for getting benched. Let's not forget, it is Matt Milano. And I think Dorian understands how important he is and how vital he is to this defense and what he can do. But I just think that there could be a happy medium where maybe they put Dorian in on some rundowns, maybe first and second. Like for this week against the Lions, going back to the question here, I think you have to mix it up a little bit because you can't just keep running nickel, and then nickel and dime. Maybe even throw out a 4-3 base with Dorian coming out on the field with Milano. But I just think that Dorian needs to see more than 0 snaps this week because Montgomery and Gibbs will eat against this Bills defense if they cannot control the line of scrimmage like they could not last Sunday in Los Angeles.
Now, see, I do see this comment here saying they should let Von Miller play. I agree with that. I thought A.J. Epinesa had one of his worst games of the year last week, and I felt like Von Miller had a pretty good game. Me moving forward, I'm putting Von Miller in the starting rotation. Even if it is
Von
against
has
a
been
run-heavy team.
Playing, though.
Right, I'm trying to see his snap count.
32, yeah. Okay, 32% of the snaps.
Yep, he played 32% of the snaps, and A.J. Epinesa played 68. I would give Von Miller a few more of the snaps instead of A.J. Epinesa. How do you feel about that?
So in that case, Von has essentially been that third down pass rusher. So they're using Von the way that I'm saying that they could use Dorian, where like his specific role is on passing situations. So I know he's Von Miller and he's in a tier of his own. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer. But I think that you could use the same methodology with Dorian and say, okay, well, you're going to be our rundown linebacker just until Matt Milano gets caught up to speed, because these are some huge opponents, and nothing against New England or the Jets. Well, then again, I don't think anyone's going to take offense to it on this show. But
No.
The Lions and Rams are way better than the Patriots and the Jets. So if Matt Milano is trying to get caught up from 2 serious injuries, it might be a little bit too much for him too fast. So that's why I think if you can platoon him with Dorian for a little bit, maybe those Patriots and Jets games are the time that you can really ramp up Milano before the playoffs.
It really could be. I'm kind of curious to see how McDermott feels about that moving forward.
Well, now we have Kevin here. I think Kevin's ready. So we will bring him on here as we will transition into our Lions talk. Kevin, how you doing?
What is the good word? Did get to catch some of that segment. We'll maybe circle back on some of those points here in a moment. So it's glad to be here to talk Lions. Got a great Lions guest, really good, early season battle between a couple of teams where you can see it as a Super Bowl preview, as our show alludes to. So that should be more than fun to get into a little bit. But still, I want to preface this before we start the Lions talk, just like to wrap the Rams talk. It's an NFC battle on the road. When you have things wrapped up, we need to keep it in perspective. The grandiose the one thing I'll say about the Rams game real briefly, the grandiose statements of fire this person or change this scheme, I think is misguided in the fact of Josh Allen spoke about it today, basically stating like, yeah, we had a long flight. We have the division wrapped up. It is what it is. So to me, I need to see obviously growth in the last couple of games. This is unprecedented and uncharted territories to be playing for seeding. So we have to see how much that really plays into mindsets, and mindsets are huge. Going and you got a team like the Rams up against their division, against the Bills playing for. Are they the 2 seed? Are they the 3 seed? Will the Chiefs finally lose? Are they going to keep winning on doinked field goals? Like at some point you need to make that adjustment. And the Lions are still technically playing for a division. They have Minnesota right on their heels and they have to deal with them. So this game still has a pretty big feeling for them. And the Bills are still determining how much that the 1 seed matters, the 2 seed matters, and even less so the 3 seed. Like at some point, what is the grand difference? Getting in healthy is going to be the number one concern, but we have to talk Lions. I'm pretty excited to do so. So we're going to have our guest Pierre joining us any minute now. That should be pretty fun to get into this matchup. And they're pretty banged up on defense. But I mean, there are a couple of their defensive linemen have practiced today. So we'll see what they have and what they're looking for. And I'm interested to get his mindset on with the division race still available for the Detroit Lions, how their mindset is playing an AFC opponent this late in the year with this kind of, I guess, buzz. They're sending out the game day crowd. They're sending them. They're going to be out in like they were for the Bills Chiefs. So there's, they are playing it up, but at the same time, it still only means so much to the Buffalo Bills. And I'm curious to see how much from their perspective, this battle means to them as they approach their playoff scenario. So there's a lot to dissect into that. And we'll see if the Bills seeding hangover continues into this week before they realize they have to really have it in the future weeks going forward. So I think there's a lot that goes into how you break this game down. But ultimately, I got to know the feeling of it's not the Super Bowl and it's certainly not December. The seeding importance of it has been it's been a challenge for me to cover from a perspective of how this game is going to go and how the Rams game went. And ultimately, is there an element of you could play this team again, potentially in a meaningful scenario? Do you do the old grand, like how much can you show, or does that not matter? So there's so much that goes into this game, and even a little bit to the Rams game that really leads me believing, like, I don't know how much they really, 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 really are going to go balls to the wall for seeding purposes. That's the number one thing that I question in a couple of these games, and hopefully into these AFC games as the Division 3 games that go on here. That's going to be a big determination for the Buffalo Bills and how they need Kansas City to lose at some point, or they're just going to be in this same rut. And the Steelers have a tough schedule. I know they know that. The Bills do not control their own destiny for the 2 seed right now, though. Do need to put that out here on the podcast. If they both win out, the Steelers get the 2 seed. So I don't believe the Steelers will win out. However, we'll see how that looks going forward. They have the 2 seed at the moment only because strength of victory is in the Bills' favor. But playing the Jets, Patriots, it's going to dip your strength of victory with a bunch of teams with 3 wins. So there's a lot to remember about the strength of victory discussion, that if you win those games, you're going to really drastically lower your pretty decent strength of victory. And the Steelers play some hard teams. You're going to go like this. So if for some reason the Steelers won out, they would earn the 2 seed and potentially even the 1, because that would be a win over the Chiefs. So there's a lot to remember if they can beat the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Eagles. So if they do that, they deserve, honestly, if they win that stretch, that's a deserving stretch for seeding purposes. But I think it's time to talk Lions now. I'm looking forward to bringing on Pierre. Pierre, welcome to the show. Pierre, how are you doing today?
Hey, Kevin, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Just want to apologize. My camera isn't working here, so I guess the audio will do.
I like the background.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet, huh?
Yeah, I like it.
I just totally thought that you weren't ready, or like you were in the bathroom or something. So you had me fooled.
Yeah, it's a good background, man. I like it a lot. Is that your man cave, or is that just a random image?
It's just from Google. A picture from Google.
It.
Yeah.
I like it. What we like to do with all of our guests, man, I really appreciate you stepping in here. And I know we were going to get both of you tonight, but really, really, really glad to see you for Tyler. Give us a breakdown on the Lions season. I know a lot of people with their record know a decent amount about the Lions, but you would know best. So bring up, we're an AFC team. I know we played a couple of years ago now because of the Thanksgiving game, and this is like a crossover divisional seeding ranking game.
Right.
So those are cool that the league brought these in. But talk to us, give us a recap of the Lions season. We know the defensive injuries, we know the record, but give us a recap of the first 3/4 of the season.
So honestly, when you think about it, the first 2 games you're 1-1. Like, all right, like we'll see what we got here. Then they go on this streak. They've won 12 straight, I believe now, right? 12 straight or 11 straight. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They've won 11 straight games. And despite, you're talking about your starting 2 edge rushers go down. Your starting linebacker goes down. Your starting left tackle has missed, multiple games. DJ Reader missed like 3-4 games this year. It doesn't matter who's in there. It just feels like the job will get done. And that's a credit to Dan Campbell and his coaching staff, the culture they built Detroit. The saying they use grit. I know it's kind of like everyone says grit, but Detroit is truly like a gritty team. I mean, last week, if you watch the game, they signed like 3 or 4 guys off the practice squad, showed up on Sunday, and they played on Thursday.
Wild. That's wild.
That is wild. And I mean, you saw like the defense wasn't as good, but they played good enough to win. And these guys that they added actually were solid as well. So the story's kind of always been next man up and win at all costs. Doesn't matter where we are. Doesn't matter if it's snow, if it's raining, if it's indoor, if it's outdoor, wherever the game's at. Win at all costs, no matter who's in or who's out.
For sure. And we saw the fourth quarter decisions by Dan Campbell, and one, like the most recent one, I thought was crazy. As somebody that's a fourth quarter guy or fourth down guy, I'm all for winning the game. The Bills have beaten the Chiefs many times when making those decisions, but that one seemed tough, especially to me, where you could lose the game by being stopped. What were your opinions on the fourth downs in general, and specifically against the Packers?
So I'm the guy that's always go for it on fourth. The only one I didn't agree on was the one, and I think it was on our own 30-yard line. It was like 4th and 1, and they went for it. That's the one I didn't agree with. But just about that last one, though. So if you think about it, the Jets, it was 4th and 2, and they kicked a field goal to get the 3-point lead, right? And then they didn't go for the win. They went for the field goal, and the Dolphins tied the game. They went in OT last week. So the idea behind that is don't get the ball to the defense, just end it.
Sure.
And I like that. I mean, yeah, it's aggressive, and yeah, maybe you don't get it, whatever. But like when you look at the Lions, though, that's their identity. That's Dan Campbell, and it doesn't matter if it's the Packers, if it's whatever team. It doesn't matter what the score is. It doesn't matter what the record is. He's going to go for it on fourth down. I want people to realize that. I am tired of everyone saying why do it. That's the identity of the football team. That's what they do. You're going to see this week if it's like 4th and 3, let's say like near midfield or like. Like on the 33, he's not going to hit the field goal. He's going to go for it.
Sure. Does anything change? So you said it doesn't matter the record. That's their identity. What about like going up against the Mahomes, Josh Allen? None of that. That'll probably make you more aggressive in a way, wouldn't it? And isn't that like I would assume to be almost to a situation where you're probably never going to punt?
Yeah, I mean, look, they do punt. They have an all-pro punter and Jack Fox, great punter. But if he has a chance to go for it, and if the offense, I guess it kind of depends on the game too. If the offense is moving the ball, or if they're, what they like to run fourth down sides run because they got a big physical offensive line, and they got 2 great backs in Montgomery and Gibbs. So if the run game is working, they'll go with that. But if they need like a money play, most likely it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, he's the guy they call on when they need a big play.
Fair enough. The running identity seems to be pretty strong in Detroit right now. Is that something that you're going to feel like you're going to lean into the playoffs with, whether it's, the Montgomery Gibbs combination? How does that play out? How is it just a switching of series? Talk to us about how they go ahead and determine the running back rotation in terms of pounding the rock and how much you've liked what Ben Johnson's been able to do so far.
So obviously Gibbs and Monty are 2 different backs. They got the nickname Sonic and Knuckles. I don't know if you know about that. Sonic is like the speedy guy. Knuckles is like the more power, guy. But it's kind of like, honestly, they'll start one drive with Gibbs. They'll bring another drive with Monty. Sometimes both guys will rotate in a drive. It's not like necessarily like, oh, this guy's going to get this much snaps a game. This guy's getting that much. That kind of just goes with the flow of the game. Like they both play a lot. They both will get the ball a lot. People that play fantasy football, I know they're probably annoyed with this, but it's either one. Either one could go off at any moment, especially Gibbs. He's that home run ability. He's averaging 5.7 yards a carry, which is pretty damn impressive.
For sure.
Yeah, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown, and as great as he is, it's very annoying because you have such a great ground and pound attack here between those 2 running backs, and just the identity in general. You're talking about it. Bite the kneecaps, playing with that grit that Dan Campbell wants. And I feel like Detroit's really taken on that identity because I had Jared Goff as my quarterback too. And there were a lot of games when Detroit would put up 50 points, but Goff only had 100 passing yards, maybe 1 or 2 passing touchdowns because Montgomery and Gibbs were just so dominant. So I guess, can you just kind of speak on the balance that they've had between Goff, Amon-Ra, and this rushing attack? Because it seems like for real life purposes, it's a great combination. But for fantasy purposes, it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, fantasy is not fun. But when you look at the Lions offense in general, they want to pass it and they want to run it. They want to be balanced. And they've been balanced this year. The only game that they lost this year was the Tampa game. Felt like they passed a little too much and they should have ran them more. That's the game they lost. If you look at their other games, they've had a really balanced attack. And let's say a team stops the running game, for example. We've seen Jared Goff. He could pick it up a little bit. He could start throwing the ball. If you stop the run game, we could throw it on you. If you want to play too deep, don't matter who you are. I know the Bills love to run a lot of nickel, which kind of makes them a little smaller in the box. Ben Johnson doesn't care if you stop it once or twice. He's going to keep doing it. One of them's going to pop off. One or two will pop off. And that's how the offense works. They're patient with it. If something's not working, they'll keep doing it, the run game. And, especially on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, they run these draws, catch teams off guard a little bit. Teams will think it's a pass, and you'll see Gibbs run for like 14, 15 yards on a 3rd down play. Because teams like to play small. They play small, we'll play big. That's the identity of it. It's kind of like attack the team at their weakness and see what you could do.
Yeah. Now, going off of that point, I want to ask about Sam Laporta, because being the tight end, he can do a little bit of both, help out in the passing game and the running game. And I believe it was a bit of a sophomore slump for him in the early stages of the season, maybe even towards the middle part as well. But I think he's starting to hit his stride. Would that be the correct assessment? And what can you say about Laporta in his second season?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a sophomore slump. Campbell hinted in the offseason that Laporta's targets are going to go down just because Jameson Williams is back in the lineup and they want to get him more involved. And, you want to run the ball more, get the backs. Last year was Gibbs, like maybe we don't want to put too much pressure on him, but this year he's more involved in the pass game as well, both backs. So it's kind of one ball to go around. You have all these weapons. But one thing with Laporta, I'll say his run blocking has greatly improved. I mean, he's a stud at blocking right now. He's really good. The game they missed him, it was obvious they were missing him in the running game. In the red zone, he's a big threat as well. Last 2 weeks ago, I believe he had 2 touchdowns. But the thing is, if one guy doesn't go off, the other guy will go off. I mean, like I said, last week you had 6 players catch 5 passes. So it's a very balanced attack.
So I guess you can say the same thing about Laporta that you can with Amon-Ra. It's not that they're having poor seasons. It's just, like you said, there's only one ball that goes around. And with Dan Campbell, specifically Ben Johnson, wanting to be a balanced offense here, it's probably just hard for them to really pad those stats like maybe we've seen in previous seasons.
Right. And then, Kevin, let's say you want to take Jameson Williams out or take St. Brown out. Okay. Tim Patrick last week had 6 catches, 2 touchdowns. Okay, yeah. We'll give it to, like, pick your poison kind of thing. You want to take this guy? We have this guy. You want to do this? We'll do this. It's kind of a luxury to have all that.
Certainly. I mean, one thing you'll see the Bills do in this matchup, especially this matchup, and even going forward, is they're just going to play nickel. They're going to play nickel. They're going to run Taron Johnson in there, one of the best tackling nickels in the league, and they're just going to see what happens. That is 100% how they're going to play. It's how they've played since 2017. A lot of times they can be wildly successful at it. They're going to play a lot of zone. I wanted to ask you, all of Goff's interceptions are against zone. Is there something, and that's going to further the Bills into continuing into that zone. Is there something to that, or is that just random? But I read all of the struggles have been against zone as compared to man-to-man coverage, which the Bills will definitely play into. So do you know anything about that, or is that just a random, like, factoid?
So the issue with that actually is kind of true what you mentioned, even last year as well a little bit. So the issue with that is the offense is like a precision type offense. If one guy's off his route a little, or if he slips or falls, it throws everything off. Like, Goff throws it anticipating the guy will be there. Like versus the Texans, he threw it to Laporta. Laporta slipped. That was a pick.
Sure.
Jameson Williams versus the Texans kind of ran the wrong route. Campbell blamed it on James. I blame it more on Goff, but it's another pick over there. So that worst game came versus the Texans. It was 5 picks. Honestly, I probably put maybe 2 on him and 3 on, maybe one was on the O-line a little bit. One was tipped at the line of scrimmage, whatever. But he also has success, though, in picking apart his zone. I mean, you saw Seattle, was it week 3 or week 4? It was a national televised game. He picked that defense apart. They play a lot of zone. He destroyed it. I think they put up 42 points on offense. So he does struggle a little bit in zone. I don't want to say struggle, but that's where he throws the turnovers. But I'm not really too concerned about Goff and man, zone, or blitz. He thrives in those situations. But the picks do come in a zone defense.
They'll live and die. But the Bills will live and die by that. I mean, they blitz Stafford a little bit more than they've used to in the past. But the Bills won't blitz for the most part, historically speaking. Played a little bit more man lately. They'll play a little bit more man against the Chiefs because they don't feel they have any weapons, and they've generally been right, at least in this regular season. But at least in this game, I wouldn't see them. I wouldn't see them going to a man-heavy scheme at all or blitzing. They're going to live and die by their zone coverage and hopefully fool. In one side, show a man look, drop into zone. They're going to do stuff like McDermott's going to do stuff like that, disguising his coverages. He's going to come off of that Rams loss, which is not historically the way his defense plays. So he's going to make adjustments for sure in that specific game. And they're going to probably bring a more, I would say, a systematic approach to how they'll run their defense, including maybe seeing another corner in Jamarcus Ingram, a guy who has a lot of ball skills for an injured Rasul Douglas, who really struggled last week against the Rams. Now, with the Rams in mind, talk to me. How did you feel about that? Just real quickly, the trade. Like, I mean, you guys will ever be connected between the playoff games. Maybe you get another one this year if the Rams sneak in. They're showing like they could. Like you're ever going to be connected a little bit. Like, how did you feel about that trade? How have you, I mean, you obviously got a nice compensation return. Like how is the feeling for watching Stafford and the Rams now obviously playing good football again? How are you guys feeling out of Detroit with that trade and your compensation and the whole package?
Yeah, so that first year, like the Lions weren't necessarily like competitive. Yeah, they were just kind of getting started their first year, and Stafford was going to the Super Bowl. Most of Detroit was rooting for Stafford. Mm-hmm. Then the third year, I believe, Stafford comes to town here for Detroit's first playoff game. And Stafford kind of became that villain, Like, no, we're not going to clap for him. We don't care if he's played for us. Like, cool, we appreciate everything you did for us. But this is our turn. You got yours, now it's us. That's kind of the feeling about it. Same with when we played on week 1 this year. It's kind of like, I feel like, I don't want to say rivalry, but kind of like feels like a little rivalry sort of is forming, I guess, between Detroit and LA. It's a pretty cool story. I'm happy for him. He got his ring. He did a lot for our team, but now it's our turn.
Yep.
It's Detroit's turn. But I do have a question for you.
Yeah, shoot.
You mentioned that the Bills like to play a lot of nickel, right? And you mentioned that Rasul Douglas is hurt, and I also saw Taylor Rapp. I don't know if he's going to play or not. He didn't practice today as well. Do you think that nickel defense could bite them in the ass against Detroit's physical front and really good backs?
Yes.
Kevin will probably say yes more than I will. The Bills have done it against everybody. Like, look, sometimes it will bite them. They'll run it against, you pick your team here, whether it's the Texans and Joe Mixon, whether it's, even Derrick Henry, even if it's, you pick your player, the Bills will determine that they're going to run. They just feel Taron Johnson's as good as anybody's third linebacker, including their own. So that's really where it'll come down to them feeling like they can disguise things with him. He's still not a liability. He's a big physical,
right.
Not big in stature, but he's a big player. He plays up. So
right.
The Bills will definitely feel like they're not going to lose much and then can disguise some stuff out of it. And then they'll throw run blitzes. That's the one thing that was successful for the Bills last week. That's how the Bills were able to start to at least put a lot of pressure on the Rams. They were run blitzing. And kept the Rams to 3.3 yards per carry after the Rams had a concerted effort to run the ball pretty heavily. And the Bills, believe it or not, like they don't really care about the box score. They care about the play-to-play analytics of the run. And they're still top 10 in run defense out of nickel. And they feel like that can be what they're looking for too. But yeah, sure, there's going to be moments in this game to where if you're a Bills fan, you'll be frustrated by staying in nickel. They just won't bring their third linebacker on very often. It just doesn't happen. It would have to take a situation to where you're not throwing the ball literally at all. Then the Bills may make it. I've seen them make adjustments with weather occasionally and other factors, but I've never really seen them in an ideal condition game that make an adjustment to take their nickel off the field. Taron Johnson's he's at like borderline captain and one of their best players.
Right.
And the thing that's interesting for the Bills, and we were talking about it with the Rams, the Bills are playing for seeding right now. They clinched their division in an epic fashion way too early. And they're they're kind of flirting with all these Chiefs wins. They keep winning off of random scenarios. And then like they're not overly playing for a ton. So that makes this game even more interesting. And then from a Detroit perspective, obviously you have Minnesota, right on your heels, and especially with another matchup to come. So how are you? Yeah, Philly as well. So how are you guys looking at this matchup? I mean, you're right in the thick of it. Obviously already clinching a playoff spot at least. I mean, that wasn't really in question. But,
right.
You're the AFC opponent late in the year. What's the feeling out of your opinion on like the style, the morale of the game of it's not the Super Bowl? So I guess talk to me about like how you like what you feel about this game going in.
So I'm just going to kind of say what the Campbell said, our head coach. Last week, he kind of said this is kind of where like the playoff football begins for us. And then today he said he feels like the team could and will improve in all aspects, like special teams, offense, and defense. So Detroit is not taking this game lightly at all. They want first place. They want that bye week as well. They're gonna go in, give it all they got, and I'm sure you guys are gonna give it all you got as well. But the Lions today had a padded practice. I know you guys had a walkthrough.
Yep.
So Detroit is all hands on deck. They're ready to go. They're not taking obviously Buffalo lightly. Buffalo's great. I actually think this is a Super Bowl preview, in my opinion. I think we could see each other again later in the year. I don't know if you guys think the same way, but that's what I think.
It's definitely one of like I think 3 or 4 possible Super Bowls, I think, in my opinion. So I would imagine that even odds makers would say it's like got a probability, and I could look it up, but there's a probability that these two teams play for sure. And I mean, I believe that, yeah, most Bills fans are taking this as a Super Bowl type of preview. Obviously, you play the Chiefs, and that's an AFC Championship game type of preview.
Right.
But as far as the Super Bowl goes, like you could make a couple of combinations, really. You got the Chiefs against the Lions, Eagles. You got the Bills against possibly the Lions, Eagles. But yeah, I would say that those are the most probability of a playoff Super Bowl matchup. So it's going to be interesting to see how these teams play it. And once again, the Bills are going to have their entire, like the Bills don't have injuries right now. So the only injuries they have on their roster for once, their entire offense will play, which is going to be a first. Dalton Kincaid, they're obviously tight end 1, and Keon Coleman, who had great rapport with Josh. And now Josh Allen obviously has a rapport with Khalil Shakir and Amari Cooper. So the Bills will have their entire plethora, and their O-line's been pretty good. The Bills O-line's strong. So you're going to have a plethora of the Bills offensive. And really, you just mentioned it. Their newest injuries are week-to-week injuries. Rasul Douglas probably won't play, as we can see on the screen here. Taylor Rapp does do this. He was in a non-contact into Friday last week. I would anticipate him playing, but we'll see how his practice schedule plays out later in the week. The one thing you're probably going to hear about a lot, if you're just scrolling Twitter, is the reemergence of Micah Hyde. Will he, someone that knows this defense well, who's been an all-pro in this defense, will he be elevated to play, or will they go with the rookie and Cole Bishop? I would lean that they'll go with Cole Bishop, but you never know. So that's probably something you'll see late in this week is if Rapp can't go, you're probably going to hear some rumblings of Micah Hyde being up and ready from a week basis. So it's going to be interesting to see, especially no weather, no elements like that. It's going to be interesting to see. But those are really their only two players. They have a couple guys coming off of IR. They could activate any of them if they wanted to. The Bills don't really need their backup tackle, their 5th defensive end, or their 6th linebacker. So if they feel like ever activating them, they can. But the Bills are relatively healthy going into this game. So it's going to be a pretty cool situation. And I guess with that being said, on the injury report, talking about the Detroit injuries, I saw some defensive linemen come back, but I mean, talk to me about the expectation. Are they going to push him for this game? That was a big question. Will they push him for this game, or are they thinking long-term? That's a huge question for any franchise.
So last week they kind of set out guys, I think, to be more cautious with them. You had that little extra long week with the Thursday game. So I think Decker is going to go, the starting left tackle. He didn't play last week. Aleem McNeil is in protocol, had a full practice today. He's good to go. Levi Onwuzurike practiced today. Josh Pascal practiced today. The only one that's Campbell said is questionable, he'll know more tomorrow, is DJ Reader. But Reader was doing work on the side with the trainers. So if I had to guess, I guess he's in. I think everyone Everyone practiced on the 53 except Reader today, but he was doing some work on the side with the trainers. I think everyone should be good to go, bearing any setbacks, obviously, versus Buffalo.
Good to know. Yeah, we'll track both injury reports, but at least for where some of the injuries Detroit had coming in, it looks pretty clean on both sides. I mean, I know you guys have a lot more players on IR, but at least from a 53 perspective, it looks pretty clean. For the most part, we'll have to track Reader, and we'll have to track Rap as the week goes on to see each player, if each will get their full complement of defensive starters, at least on the roster. Have those injuries affected you guys? Like, that's one thing. I mean, it doesn't seem like it in the win-loss column. Will that come back to bite you with the linebacking play? I guess talk to me about, I've tracked some of those injuries, and it just seems like, as you mentioned, not missing a beat, and you can pull players off on a Thursday, and what Aaron Glenn's been able to do. But, missing some of those bigger names has been, seemed to be a pretty big sign that you're able to overcome, whoever it is, Anzalone or, whoever, whatever Marcus Davenport earlier this year, or whatever it happens to be, Aiden Hutchinson. Do you think that'll bite you at some point? It's reminiscent of a Bills team we had where we were very good, top of the league. It came back to bite us in the playoffs. Are you worried about that? Or are you thinking that even against good opponents, you think that it will continue to go in your favor?
So we did get good news on Anzalone. He should be back versus Minnesota last week game, or the first playoff game.
Nice.
So that's good news. But you mentioned the linebackers. They picked up this linebacker off the street a few weeks ago, Ezekiel Turner. He's known for his special teams, but he's balled out for Detroit. He's played really good football. He's not the biggest linebacker, undersized kid, but he's really good. He's played well in coverage. He's played the run well. He plays aggressive, plays fast. Another guy, David Long Jr., who you guys know from the Dolphins. He struggled with Miami, but, they switched their schema, didn't fit, but he played well in Tennessee. And our D-line coach, Coach T, was with him in Tennessee. He came here. He's played some solid ball for us as well. So, honestly, the two guys they've added, I don't know what they would do without those two guys. I'm going to be honest, but those two guys they've added have helped the defense a lot. And Jack Campbell, obviously, I know you guys wanted him during the draft. A lot of Bills fans wanted him. He's been playing the best ball he's played in his career right now, and it looks like he's kind of taking control of that defense with Anzalone out. I mean, it's his defense.
Nice.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was a big Jack Campbell guy, so that was going to be one of my questions. But if you want to talk about these injuries more, Kevin, I'll save the Campbell question.
No, go ahead. It's a good time.
Okay, yeah. So what can you tell us about Jack Campbell? Because that was the 22 draft.
It was last year.
Third season?
No, second season.
23.
23, that's right.
Season, yeah.
Dorian Williams. Yeah, we went Dorian Williams.
Okay, yeah. And Dorian has played very well, but I was thinking that, and to be fair, this is before we knew that Terrell Bernard was Terrell Bernard. So I thought that Jack Campbell would be a perfect middle linebacker in McDermott's defense. And ultimately, they had different ideas, which is fine. But I think that if they did draft Jack Campbell, he probably would have worked out pretty well, because it seems like, I remember the scouting reports on him just said that he just is like that kind of guy, like that gritty, hard-nosed, stereotypical classic middle linebacker, right?
Yeah, one thing with Jack is, last year I feel like they asked him to do a little too much. He played different Will, Sam, Mike, whatever, as a rookie, and they moved him around a lot. This year, they're like, you're just going to be the Mike Packer, and he's improved in coverage. Last year was a little struggle for him. This year, he's been great in coverage, great in the run game. I think this guy next year could be like an all-pro type linebacker. I mean, this year we've seen flashes of it. Really, he's really good, but I think next year could be great. He's playing really well right now for a second-year player. That's encouraging to see, because last year, there was flashes, but it's like, it's going to be like a little. How's it going to be with Jack? Is it going to be like a got to be patient with him, or is he going to come out swinging? And this year, he's been great for us.
Nice. Yeah, one thing real quick on the Campbell stuff. The Bills never had a shot at him. The Lions, with their second choice, ended up picking him well before the Bills even. So we don't even know if the Bills liked him, if they loved him, if they didn't like him. It was all smokescreen. We'll never know. But the Bills really didn't have a realistic, when the Lions determined to take their two choices. The Bills never really had a realistic shot at him, thus basically entrenching one of the tight ends as the Bills. The Bills wanted weapons, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. Campbell was right there, and then obviously Dalton Kincaid, but it was pretty entrenched that once Campbell went, that the Bills were going to go with one of those weapons. And Dalton Kincaid's worked out nice. He's gotten a nice rest here. Should be back in full strength. He's a nice weapon. I mean, you guys have the other one. So there's definitely some crossovers in that draft. We, both looking tight end, both looking, possibly at linebacker. The Bills went Dorian Williams. So they had a lot of crossover theories between the two franchises, specifically in last year's draft. So it's interesting tracking each one of those players. But now looking at the matchup a little bit, and the Bills, obviously, you got basically in all major categories. I guess you got the Ravens in there too, but you got the Bills, Lions in a lot of categories right there, neck and neck. Mm-hmm. Offensive shootout. Are you buying an offensive shootout, or you think some defense will come to play here?
So, Kevin, my honest opinion is I still think like the Lions, their goal is probably to keep. I know that LA did that, and you guys still scored 42 points, but it's to try to control the ball and run the ball, especially if you guys are going to be playing a lot of nickel. I know you said you've stopped it, but I guarantee you, Ben Johnson, he likes to do a lot of 2 tight end sets, 3 tight end sets. If you're a nickel in that, he feels like, even if you have Teron Johnson, great player, I think he feels like he could exploit that matchup a little bit. I expect Detroit to run the ball and to control the clock, and all of that, the play action game comes alive. And Jared Goff is one of the best with the play action game. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting is what the Bills will do EPA-wise. So their numbers will actually turn out pretty good. They'll run blitz, and they're going to stop the run. Now, where I believe they've been more vulnerable off of that, though, is the commitment to the run out of nickel, thus giving them back end issues where their back end's usually very strong. But if a team's able to exploit it, so I think the second part of it, like you just mentioned, I think is where the Lions would be able to go ahead and make a really successful game. The Bills will counter, and they'll be pretty strong late in the game, especially in the second half against the run. They just usually are. But the counter by the Lions at that stage, I imagine, is they're going to be able to find some openings now that the Bills are committing to the run, and they will, whether it's Teron Johnson or not. They'll be able to find openings in the zone. So, I mean, I would imagine when the Bills are in a cover 3, that it's really going to be up to Jared Goff at some point. The Bills will make him win. They will. And he's been successful at it so far. And I think that, to your point, if he's able to get the Bills in a situation where they're run blitzing, the Bills bite on it, and you hit it with a screen, you hit it with a beater, like the Rams did it with Puka Nacua. Much discussion on Cooper Kupp's block, but if you hit him with a beater like that, that's how the Bills were committed to coming up to the line of scrimmage to confuse Stafford. He called a nice. That's why the Bills don't generally like blitzing. He called a nice, basically wide receiver screen with a curl out pick play essentially, and Cooper Kupp did the rest for Puka Nacua. I'm assuming the Lions have similar concepts in what they're able to do. They're going to do eye candy. They're going to get you out of your position. They're going to make you think one way when it's coming right at you. Those are all things that I expect from the Lions to be able to do to the Bills. And the Rams were successful at it. Ultimately, what they were able to do against the Bills defense, something we don't generally see under Sean McDermott, not often. Josh Allen has a 90% winning percentage when he scored over 28 points. So it's not common for the Bills to get into that kind of game. And they generally beat people by 9+, even the Chiefs. So that's why I'm really interested in what the Lions are going to be able to do. They're treating it like a very, very, very meaningful game. I believe the Bills will do the same.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting for a late season AFC NFC game.
Another thing, Kevin, is Campbell doesn't forget losses. You guys came Thanksgiving to our house and beat us. He always brings that up to his players, maybe not as much to the media, but we've heard like he'll bring it up to the players like, these guys beat us at our home. We're not going to let it happen again. So Detroit's going to be extra motivated as well because of that. I really believe that as well. And you guys, and Campbell even mentioned it, you guys are pissed off right now. You lost to LA. You put up 42 points and still lost. Was it 42? I think it was 42.
Yep.
42 points and still lost. That has to hurt for the team. And we're getting a pissed off Buffalo team as well. So it's not going to be like a walk in the park. I feel like whoever has the ball last is probably going to win the game.
Josh Allen generally doesn't lose off of a loss, and he's never lost off of 2 losses. Now, this wouldn't be a 2-loss scenario, but his record off a loss is very, very, very strong for the reasons you just mentioned. Josh Allen reminds me a lot of Campbell in that fact of he remembers losing last week, and he probably hears the chatter of what Detroit is and what they're able to do, and Josh Allen definitely uses that as fuel in games like when he was overrated, the most overrated player in the league. He definitely took that to heart. Basically had a good season. Usually first quarterback to ever have 6 touchdowns and lose with 42 points. So there's definitely some things that he's probably feeling some type of way. And don't forget, the Bills had 14 points with 5 minutes left in the third quarter. So they scored a ton of points in the last third of the game. So Josh Allen himself will then take accountability for like, dude, we can't start the first 2/3 of the game like that. Had we not, they had the double dip opportunity and didn't score on either end of the double dip. So had they had the opportunity to do a little bit more to keep the ball out of the Rams' hand, just like you were talking about, the outcome is a little bit different for the Bills. So I think Josh Allen's going to take some of that stuff to heart. And they quite frankly have ran the ball really well this year as well. They did not against the Rams for whatever reason. So we're going to they're going to take that to heart off of that loss. Nothing that Detroit did. But I think it leads for a really good game. Not that it wasn't going to be already. But flip the script and say the Bills blew out the Rams and they're coming off a loss to the Packers. You guys would probably come in pretty angry.
Dan Campbell hasn't lost back-to-back games, I want to say, since 2022 midseason or something like that. He just hasn't. Yeah. I do have a question for you guys, though. Where do you feel like the Bills could exploit Detroit? Like, where do you feel like you could attack Detroit? Or what do you feel like Detroit could attack you? First, we'll start with your strengths and maybe your weaknesses.
Definitely, you've mentioned it. The Bills will be a nickel and they'll bait you to run, and you're going to run. Like, I mean, obviously, if someone's going to say run the ball, I'm assuming especially your team will run the ball. The Bills will then counter on an adjustment on that. They'll say, okay, this is what they're doing. They're running this kind of play. We're going to run blitz. Okay. They're going super wide. We're going to move out we're going to go wide 9. We're going to move out some things. So that's what the Bills generally like to do. They're going to show you a soft box in the first quarter, 100%. Like, I would be shocked if the Bills do anything other than show you. If they show you a pretty stacked box in the first quarter, it would be the first time I've ever been like, wow, the Bills really switched up a defensive game plan. But if they're going to come out and show you a soft box, they're going to probably come out in some form of cover 3, some form of too high. And they're going to see what your best run plays are. The Bills will adjust to that from there. That's what they've done. And quite frankly, the Ravens have been able to do it. The Rams were last week. And the Lions are probably in that category of being able to do enough out of that to cause the Bills more headache than they wanted to have, than say even like the Dolphins, who have a pretty good offense when healthy. And even, in other teams, like they've been down in games before, like they were down against the Texans as well and came roaring back. The Bills want you to show them their best running plays. If you do that, they make their adjustments. So the Lions are a good enough team. So that's their weakness. They're going to run at it. They're going to play nickel. And they're going to say, you guys can get up enough to where you can put a really big burden on the Bills to make a roaring attempt to come back. That's definitely going to be their weakness going in, and their strength. It's essentially what Josh Allen's been able to do all season. The Bills run the ball really well. They did not last week. James Cook has had a really great season. He's got double-digit touchdowns. He's broken big runs. The Bills use all 3 of their running backs, guys that not a lot of people know about, in Ray Davis and in Ty Johnson, who's really effective on third down.
Know Ty Johnson pretty well.
There you go. He's gotten better. Yeah, like he's been the perfect RB3 in the Bills offense. He was really good last week. Should have scored 2 touchdowns. He's what you're looking for from a backup veteran running back.
Right.
And the Bills love his speed. They love his versatility. They love his pass blocking. They love his hands. The Bills have a pretty good trio that they dip into some games. They run James Cook exclusively in others. But their running game is way more solid. And you add Josh Allen in the mix, and it's hard to read. I mean, Josh Allen can pull it out at any time and go for 40 yards.
Right.
It's just a matter of, especially in perfect conditions. And he was doing it last week. The Bills will run the ball. I mean, and they're going to try to exploit what they would deem to be, a hurt linebacking core. We'll see if you've mentioned some of the upgrades they're able to make from Jack Campbell to others. But the Bills will try to attack that. They're going to be in the camp of, how do I get those linebackers out of leverage and into my best position? And that's what they're going to look at. And they're going to attack their DBs. Like, the number one thing they're going to do is try to attack those boundary corners. And see, especially with their full complement of boundary receivers, Cooper and Coleman. Shakir has been dynamite. A lot of people call him Amon-Ra St. Brown light. That comp has happened very frequently lately. if you watch the way that they both play. So it's definitely a scenario where he's going to have his complement of 3 receivers. He's going to have his 2 tight ends and his 3 running backs. Those are going to put a lot of stress on the back 7 of the Detroit Lions. That's going to be their strength.
Yeah, one thing with Detroit, I would say that I wouldn't say worried about, but like Lions fans know this. Number 1 goal for Detroit going into every game, doesn't matter who we're playing, is to stop the run. It's try to make a team one-dimensional. And obviously, Josh Allen's a different type of player, and Detroit plays a lot of man coverage. We know when you play man coverage, your eyes are on the receiver, and if there's no one open, there's an open lane for Josh Allen to scramble and get a lot of yards because no one's watching and they're watching their receiver or their running back or tight end in coverage. So that's a concern of mine because the Lions play man coverage at the highest in the NFL. No one's even close to it. The D-line, obviously, I've mentioned like bodies are in and out, so the D-line has to be disciplined in their gaps. The concern for me is Josh Allen and then also Shakir versus Amik Robertson. The player that actually scares me most is not It's not Cooper. It's not Kincaid. It's not Cook. It's Shakir against Amik Robertson. Look, Amik is a good player, but I feel like he's better on the outside. But the Lions have so much depth. He's playing in the nickel this year, and he's good against the run, but he struggled a little in coverage this year. I feel like that's a mismatch for Detroit that you guys could exploit. And I know Shakir has been going crazy this year. Kind of feel like he's your wide receiver 1. I know you have Coleman. I know you have Cooper, but it feels like when Josh wants to play, he's going to give it to Shakir.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And that's why a lot of people, and his catch rate is so good, man, that like a lot of people comp him to St. Brown in the way he plays. And it's great. Like it really is interesting to see what he's been able to do out of the slot for the Bills. But I'll let Kevin go maybe if he has different strengths and weaknesses than maybe I did.
No, I think I would pretty much go in the same line that you did, Kevin, because for as much as you say in this day and age, you're not going to win with running backs, and it's going to be like this is a passing league, right? It's going to be Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen versus Joe Burrow, Josh Allen versus, pick your quarterback with the big arm, Justin Herbert, maybe even Lamar, although, Baltimore is a rushing attack. I think this is a one case where you could say it's going to be Josh Allen versus David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Because I think that you guys can exploit the Bills' run defense because the Lions saw what the Rams did to the Bills last week. And I think that they are licking their chops, knowing that they have the 2-headed monster, and they're going to say, we're going to run it down their throats and make them get out of that nickel-based defense, maybe stack the box, change their philosophy, maybe put Dorian Williams on the field. That's something that I've been talking about here throughout the show and a little bit on Twitter throughout the week. But I think that's how the Lions can attack the Bills. And I think the Bills are going to want to attack the Lions through the secondary because you guys have the 23rd ranked pass defense, giving up almost 225 yards per game. So maybe you can speak on that a little bit more because I know sometimes you got to take those numbers with a grain of salt based on matchups and game flow. But I think that you guys probably have a better run defense than pass defense in general. And the fact that you just said that with Khalil Shakir and Amik Robertson, that kind of furthers my point.
So we give up a lot of yards in the pass game, but here's the thing. They are first down and third down defense. They're ranked first and third down defense in the NFL, the Lions. They're fourth in red zone efficiency, and they're tied 6th in takeaways. They do give up some yards, but when you get in the red zone, it's really hard to score on Detroit's defense. Even with the injuries we've had that I've mentioned, it's still hard to score with Detroit's defense. Obviously, last week, DJ Reader was out, and Green Bay was able to punch it up the middle because we had Broderick Martin, second-year nose tackle, who's just not ready to play. He got pushed around like crazy. But if we get Reader back this week and you have Pascal who's really good at setting the edge, I think it's going to be hard to run it on Detroit in the red zone. A lot of teams like to do that. And then when you're like faced into like a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, it becomes condensed. The Lions play press man. So it's hard for those receivers to get off the press. And that's why their defense has been really good in the red zone.
It's kind of like the Bills with that bend but don't break, right? Where it's like, okay, you can get yards if you want, but we're going to tighten up and really slam the door shut when you're trying to score on us.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Lions are like 20-30. If you look at their DVOA, I believe they're top 3 in pass defense and top 5 in run defense.
Really? And that's why I said you got to take it with a grain of salt. It's funny because sometimes the box score stats will say one thing, but DVOA will say another.
Yeah, so I would take that grain of salt. Obviously, you do have a rookie in Terrion Arnold. If you look at PFF, they're not really friendly to him. But if you look at his film, he's really sticky in coverage. He never really gets beat. He needs to learn a little how to turn around his head. He could have had a few picks this year if he did that. But every week he's getting better. Campbell said last week was his best game, and PFF gave him like a 45 or something like that. So you take PFF a little grain of salt if you look at that. I don't know if you do or not, but Arnold is really coming along now. He's playing some really good ball. And then Carlton Davis, he's having a really good year with Detroit bouncing back. So the safeties are the best duo in the league, in my opinion, Branch and Kirby. I mean, it's tough to play against this defense, but they do give up yards because they play a lot of man. So that's the way it works.
DVOA first pass for Detroit, 6th against the run.
Thank you.
So, you know, definitely what that really could mean, to your point, is that in a game where maybe they let up a 30-yard pass, the EPA or the amount that affected the game wasn't much. So that's generally speaking what DVOA is going to measure on an average situation. How much better or worse were you than another team in a comparable scenario? So the Bills are similar in that regards to where, you know, just like you would think they get gashed and they're the worst run defense you've ever seen. Believe it or not, they're top 8 in run defense per DVOA because on 3rd and 4th down, they're very good at stopping the run. And then the amount you can affect the game on 1st down with a run, and this is what the Bills will play off of, and you'll see it on Sunday. You can't affect the game much on a 1st down run. Now, there's certain scenarios that can change. Like, obviously, there's nuance to that. But on a play-to-play basis, the Bills do not feel like on your own side of the field you can change the outcome of a game too much with running. And they gotta adjust. They gotta not be so much into that analytical mindset to where they get down in games. But for the most part, that's generally correct. In the Bills' run defense at 8th right now, DVOA. You know, you wouldn't necessarily assume so. Based on what they're able to do. But the amount of negative plays are number one. They're a boomer bust run defense. They're number 1 in the league in stuff rate in negative plays. But they've also allowed a lot of explosives on the run side. Correct. So it's very interesting to see, like, generally, and their pass defense is kind of opposite. Like, they don't like a boom pass play. So they kind of are the complete opposite style of pass defense. So it's really, really interesting to see the nuance between the Bills analytically. Here's one for you, though, that Bills fans will not be very happy with. The Bills have dropped to 29th DVOA special teams. Detroit is 1st. The Bills are not happy with Matthew Smiley. He's ran multiple situations where he doesn't have enough men on the field, or he has too many men on the field. He's not protecting. His long snappers getting bullied. His long snappers high snapping balls. Reed Ferguson, a long snapper of the Bills, who's been very good, is at a down year. He's getting bullied. He's throwing the ball super high on extra point attempts. He's affecting Tyler Bass. And a lot of people will just see a missed extra point. They don't know that that's a whole operation. And Reed Ferguson has messed up many times, in my opinion, to where he's been bailed out by Tyler Bass. What's going right, though, with the Detroit special teams? Is it gap assignment? Is it just big returns? I don't have the nuance to know why you're number 1 special teams. I could tell you why the Bills are low special teams, but I don't know why Detroit would be. That's a part of the game where the Bills lost last week, in my opinion, on how bad their special teams were. 100%. The Bills win that game with comparable special teams.
I agree with that.
Detroit, number 1, Bills 29. Maybe we have an even Stevens game. What's Detroit doing right to be the number 1 special teams by DVOA?
First of all, coverage has been outstanding. Khalil Dorsey, probably the best gunner in the league. And I'm not just saying that. You guys will see. You guys are probably going to double team 30. You'll see him run down this. He's always there. You got an all-pro punter in Jack Fox. Jesse Bates has missed only – I'm sorry. Bates has only missed 1 kick this year. Not Jesse. Jesse's the safety. Sorry about that. But Bates has only missed 1 kick this year. They got him from the XFL. He's been outstanding for us.
I've seen his stuff. Yeah, Jake Bates, right?
Jake Bates, yeah. Dave Phipp prioritizes. Dan Campbell also. They always say it's a complementary game, all 3 phases. If one phase is down, another phase picks it up. That's the way the Lions' mindset is, and they expect all 3 phases to be playing at a top level. Right now, they are. I mean, you got a clean holder, good kicker, outstanding coverage. Even though Sion Vaki, 4th round pick, I'm sorry, he's been great on special teams. You know, Ezekiel Turner, who they added, you know, you lost Jalen Reeves-Maven, your special team captain. He's on IR. They add this kid, Zeke Turner, and they don't miss a beat. He's blocked again. That's funny. But He's been great as well. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter who's out there. Dave Phipp, we trust Dave Phipp, and he's an outstanding coordinator. And it wasn't always like that because we had like musical chairs at kicker. We finally have our kicker now, and you have an outstanding punter, a great holder in Hogan Hayton, who's a rookie, I believe, beat out a veteran. So
very nice.
It's a very athletic unit as well. They
go.
play fast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big unit that number one is achievable DVOA. That means they're affecting the game the most that they can in a positive way in the NFL. So counter to the Bills, like if you look at just the raw data of that here, you got Detroit affecting the game on a special teams basis enough to be an issue. In my opinion, of course, special teams matters. Generally, you don't really notice a ton of it. Depending, you only notice it when it's bad. But Detroit's 6.6% positive on every single special teams unit play in the NFL. The Bills are negative 4%. They have an over 10% variance. So we'll see if that rears its head or not in this game.
I do think Dave Phipp. So what Dave Phipp likes to do, he likes to exploit matchups on special teams. And I do think I saw that, was it your long snapper or the guy next to him that kind of got pushed real deep and the kick was blocked? I think when you see the Lions are going to copycat. They're a copycat. You're going to see the Lions try to do that as well. Bring pressure, maybe necessarily not get the block, but, kind of cause them to panic a little or get a bad punt or get a bad snap or something. You're going to see Detroit do that a lot as well. It's a copycat league. And Dave Phipp, he talks about special teams across the league. And if he sees some matchups he likes, he's going to exploit it. He's going to try to exploit it. I don't think we have a blocked kick yet or punt, but I think
they've got a couple blocked, so we'll see if that rears its head. And the Bills generally invest into special teamers. They've always had a Taiwan Jones. They've always had a couple of guys on the roster that don't do anything but special teams, and it's helped them. This is the first year that they're rostering a ton of young players or a ton of rookie class. They're rostering whether it's a rotational defensive end like Javon Solomon, or they're rostering too many linebackers, in my opinion, like Olafosio, Joe Andreessen. They got guys that they're stashing for once. Their offensive line's pretty deep. They don't want to really let anybody go there. They have a couple of guys they really like, and their offensive line's been good. They've been healthy now. So what is punished by that is definitely been their special teams to an extent, to the point where they called up Virgil, a nice looking prospect / receiver, 6 receiver, but they can't play him this week with Keon Coleman. So the Bills are going to have decisions to make across the board with their special teams unit, man. And ultimately they have gone the era of getting younger, faster, rookie players. And they've definitely suffered on the special teams end, because now you have guys that to the point of 9 guys on the field on the last play of the game last week. It wouldn't have mattered in my opinion, but the optics of it are terrible. And that's just what you get when you have a bunch of players who don't play special teams. You don't know who's supposed to be on the field. It's ultimately hasn't been a good unit for the Bills. And they have this propensity to try to kick it short and see what returners can do. And returners have been making them pay in those scenarios. And Tyler Bass has a much big enough leg to kick it through the end zone, which is what I'll imagine them in this game, especially in an indoor, in these conditions. The Bills are going to do that. So they're going to try their best to make it a neutral, even Stevens type of swap, and probably even tell Sam Martin when he punts, it's going to be scenarios to where may take a little bit off of it to make sure that it's just no harm, no foul type of special teams play. And that's a win for the Bills if they're able to get a neutral experience from the special teams unit, because Tyler Bass is a good kicker. He's kicked a 60+ yarder.
Yes, he is. Yes. Sam Martin too. He was here in Detroit for us. We liked him.
Yeah, Sam Martin's been good in stretches for sure. Like, he's a good holder. He certainly has had some good punts. I thought he was a little slow getting that kickoff, but he also had his offensive lineman get bullied right in front of him. I guess I would be short, and I would have sped up my kick, but he kind of tried to get around it. I don't know what he was doing. That was a little error on him too, to just not rush it and maybe get a 35-yard kick, but it is what it is. Kevin, what do you got for us?
Well, should we get into score predictions?
Yeah, sure. Let's hear what Pierre has to say about score predictions, and kind of the outlook for the Lions going forward. Yeah, well, I think that's a good place to go.
Just for our score predictions, I know you guys are rooting for the Eagles, and Lions fans are rooting for the Steelers. So this is kind of like 2 big games that are big for both teams.
True.
So, but first, got to take care of our own business, and obviously you guys as well, and then you're about the other stuff. But score predictions, like I said, I think this is going to be like a nail biter type of game. I'm expecting fires not like 50 to like 60 type of fires. I'm going to say like 37-34 Detroit. I'm going to go with Detroit because they're home. And also because, like I said, they don't forget that Thanksgiving game would happen. You guys came, you guys beat us like in that last drive that you had. Ultimately, though, if I'm being honest, whoever has the ball last is probably going to win. We don't know that, though. But right now, I'm going to go with Detroit.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And lastly, tell me about the outlook. Obviously, you mentioned the other games, you control your own destiny. Luckily, the Bills,
right.
Depending on where you look, I mean, the Bills have a tiebreaker over the Chiefs, but I don't think they have the easiest finish of the schedule. So they definitely need this game as well. If they have any hopes of catching the Chiefs, they're going to get caught at some point, in my opinion, from winning on these blocked field goals, these doing field goals, these bad snaps, these toes, these penalties. Something's going to give there, in my opinion, at least for a game or two. But for you guys, you control your own destiny.
Correct.
Not even for just the number one seed. You got the Vikings right there in a pretty big matchup to end the year. So I guess what's the final outlook for the Lions? Are you expecting to be the one? I mean, you're obviously not going to be expecting to lose 3 out of these 4 games, but I guess give me the most realistic final finish that you can.
So, like, if I'm being honest with you, if they were to lose a game, the best game to lose would probably be this Buffalo against the AFC opponent. And Detroit could afford to lose 1 game and still be the number 1 seed. If they lose 2, it kind of need help from others. But if they control their own destiny, they could afford to lose 1 more game. So you got Chicago, who I think is a mess right now. I mean, they always play us tough, but I think they're different without Eberflus, we saw. And then you got San Francisco, who's banked up, and Detroit wants revenge. They want revenge after what happened in the NFC title game. And then that last game, that Minnesota game, could come down to the division. It could come down to the division, or could go down to the number 1.
Who has the tiebreaker? If they beat you, you'll both be 1-1 against each other. Are you going in with that clinched, or can they take it from you that day if you both went out?
It would have to go by strength of schedule.
Okay.
And I think we were the first seed last year, I want to say.
So you're getting deep into the tiebreakers.
I got to think about that. Yeah, I never really thought of that. I don't want to go there yet. I haven't thought about that. Once we get close to that game, I'll think about that. But
yeah, fair enough.
I think if like we both finish with the same record,
I
want to say it'd be Detroit, but don't quote. I got to look more into that.
I'm interested to see how that happens. Obviously, if they won, you'd be 1. I guess what I'm asking is, you could be clinched going into that game in theory.
Correct.
So if it's you with the tiebreaker anyways, then you would be clinched going into that game. So that's why I'm interested is, if you knew that off, but you're right. It could come into strength of victory, which, would take some more playing out. As some of first you're going to get common opponents. Obviously that's the first divisional tiebreaker. Right. I don't know where your common, you don't have the Bills in common anyways, and you lost to Tampa Bay. I don't know what they did against Tampa Bay. So it would come down to those like type of scenarios to where your losses came from. So say you only lost to them in Tampa Bay, it would be compared to who their losses, you and whoever they lost to. I can't remember.
Yeah. I don't know, but that last game could be really critical. But if Detroit, let's say, wins out these next 3-4 games, you get Minnesota, you basically clinch the 1 seed and win the division. So that's the goal right now, to win out. And maybe that Minnesota game, maybe you could rest your starters. Campbell doesn't really like to rest his starters. He doesn't necessarily always believe in that. But we'll see. The Detroit is banked up a little bit, so we'll see if that changes. But we got a long way to go until that. Let's just focus on Buffalo right now, and then week by week, because it's any given Sunday, honestly.
It sure is. Yeah, it's sure. I mean, and like you said, like, can you afford a loss? You might be able to, but even better than losing to the Bills would be going into week 18 with it all locked up.
Correct.
You have a bye after that anyway, so it's going to be double hard to do a double bye. It's probably not great for any team. I don't ever envision that. And the Bills do the same thing, man. The Bills will trot out Josh Allen into the second and third quarter of these games in week 18, and we're like, what are you doing? But they always go and win by like 20. But still, like, I never want to play the Jets, Patriots, or Dolphins. And in your case, this would be the Vikings. You never really want to play those guys deep into those games if you don't have to. So
yeah,
it's an interesting scenario. I would imagine they'd play at least a half, though, I would guess.
Yeah, one thing though I will say about the Bills and Lions, I just feel like these teams are like, I don't want to say like, it's kind of like they're like the same tier, they're like evenly matched sort of. Obviously special teams is maybe towards Detroit, but if you look at offense and defense, it's pretty dang similar all across the board. I mean, couple rankings difference here or there, but in general, like you guys are second in points, we're first in points. You know, the rush defense is good for both teams. You guys play a little more slighter boxes. It benefits you, but different style. I play Detroit runs more man, you play more zone. But in general, I just feel like the tier of the teams is the same tier, and they're very evenly matched. It's gonna be a really close game.
Yeah, for sure. And I did the simulation because I was bored, and you guys have the tiebreaker on common opponents actually. So
nice. Okay.
So even going into that game, you'll have the tiebreaker over them. I guess they lost to the Rams. You didn't. So
nice.
Those lost to the Rams. So there you go. But anyways, because of that game alone, the difference there is that you lost to the Bucks. That's an uncommon game, I guess. They didn't play the Bucks, so actually, that didn't hurt you. You know, you only have one loss as it is, but if that was a loss, that was a loss that was good because the rest of your division, it wasn't a common game. So you didn't play the NFC South this year, right?
Yeah, we're worried about Philly, honestly, and I think Minnesota.
Yeah, for sure. And then that's definitely a strength of victory thing, and that's going to have to see how the whole thing plays out. But either way, it's going to be an interesting finish for you guys. Any final thoughts, Pierre? What are you working on over there? Where can people find you if they want to check out some line stuff as these seasons go on? I guess wrap us up with some final thoughts from you.
Yeah, so you guys could find me on we have the podcast called the Pride Podcast on every podcasting platform you could think of. I'm on Twitter, as you see, at DLFP Tweets, and then my Instagram is at Detroit Lions fan page. But overall, I think the thoughts of this game is this is going to come down to the wire, and these are two teams that are evenly matched, like we talked about all show. And both teams are hungry. Like you guys are obviously fighting. You want to get home field advantage as much as you could. Maybe not the first seed, but maybe you get the second or third seed. You want that, and you know we want Pittsburgh. You want Philly. So it's going to be a fun Sunday, and let's just hope like just everyone comes out of it healthy, honestly, and we get the dub.
Yeah, that's. I mean, all you can do is hope the health. Like seriously, like I don't.
Especially us, man. My God,
man. We definitely don't want to see some big lines injuries, and equally so on our end. Like the Bills are finally going into the last 4-game stretch, which they've had the very similar luck you guys have had in past years. So right now the Bills going in healthy. Like I think they've kind of played it off a little bit too much last week, especially where they're kind of playing like let's go into the playoffs healthy. But after they got the dinged a little bit last week, I think you'll see them come back down and be like, all right, like we can't just play it like that. So, and don't forget, I mean, the Bills had a big injury on this field last year. So we'll see if that plays or 2 years ago. So we'll see if that plays a role with Von Miller going down and forever changing he was playing really good football, and he is now still. He's playing great football now, believe it or not. Then he was playing really good football and changed the trajectory of the Bills season. We didn't come out of that game with that dub you mentioned lightly. The Bills definitely took a hit that affected the rest of their season after beating the Lions on Thanksgiving. So they came with their cost of that win for sure.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate you being on, Pierre. Maybe if we see each other again, we'll have to have both of you guys back on, especially if this does happen and this is a potential playoff Super Bowl appearance. We'll definitely be in touch, man. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
guys.
Pierre. Yeah, anytime, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
nice seeing you. That was Pierre. Really great to have him on here to break into his Detroit knowledge. It's always appreciated when you have a guest who knows their team, and we're not up here assuming things that are or are not true, Kevin. But what were some of your final takeaways from that?
Well, I guess that being said, do you want to get into making our own keys to the game here?
For a few, just briefly, if we want to touch on that, we can do that briefly, and then we'll get into our own score predictions, and we'll wrap.
Okay, well, I'll just reiterate what I said with Pierre. I think that the way to attack this Lions team is going in the air through their secondary. I mean, Josh Allen is coming off of a heater with that historic performance that we saw here. There we go. Got a little thrown off there. But coming off of that historic performance, 3 touchdowns in the air, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 52 fantasy points. I mean, all the accolades keep him coming. He strengthened his case for MVP. I don't think we mentioned that tonight, but even in that loss, he did strengthen his case to be the NFL MVP. So I think they want to continue on with that if he is playing at this high level, because, he played very, very well in the snow against San Francisco, played very, very well against Kansas City. So I think the key to this game is Josh Allen, especially getting his number 2 and 3 receivers back. Now, the thing that does scare me, though, is the run defense, because flipping over to the Lions, I think that is going to be how they want to attack this Bills team. Now, they could go after Russell Douglas' side, because if he plays, he's probably not going to be 100%. And if he doesn't play, it's going to be either Jamarcus Ingram or Kyer Elam. So I could see the Lions wanting to pick on that side of the field with that zone defense that the Bills play. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to come down to the Bills' run defense against David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, because they are, I don't remember the exact stat off the top of my head, but they both have 10 plus touchdowns this season. Are they the first duo in NFL history to have more than 10 rushing touchdowns each? Was that the stat that I saw?
I don't know. I didn't see that. I wouldn't think that's true, but if you saw it, I would think that there's been a duo that's gone over 10 each, but maybe not.
Yeah, I would have to double. Maybe Pat can find that for us, Pat, if you don't mind, if you could research that stat. But I know there is some stat between the running backs having 10 rushing touchdowns each, and I believe that they are both on pace for 1,000 yards. I know Gibbs has already surpassed 1,000. Montgomery can get there too, especially if he has a great game on Sunday. So I believe they would be the first running back duo since
maybe running back duo, not including a quarterback, maybe, but I couldn't see that being in general.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if Pat can find it, but I believe that they are the first duo since D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. If they can get to 1,000 yards, it'll be the first time that two running backs have each surpassed 1,000 yards since 2009. So 15 years that it took to get to that. So I think all that to say, it's going to come down to Josh Allen against David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, which is kind of weird to say, especially in 2024. But I really think that the Lions are a different type of team. I mean, we were worried about this type of game after that Baltimore game. For as much as we say, oh man, Derrick Henry is 1 of 1. Well, the Lions as a team are 1 of 1 as well.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they play off of that defensive performance. I don't believe the Bills are going to want to look like that on back-to-back weeks. It's just not something they generally do often, even against the 2-game losing streak with Baltimore, Houston. The Bills played a lot better against Houston. Their offense was actually terrible against Houston. They had no players available, no Shakir. Like, it was just an overall a mess with what the Bills looked like in that game. But I don't believe Houston did anything in that second half. So it's just a completely different style of game. The Bills aren't going to get got again in terms of defensively. I do think there's going to be some points put up in this game. But I think the Bills may look a little bit better defensively. I still think that maybe there'll be a little bit more defense in this than either team is hoping for, especially the Bills off the Rams game, where, they're getting into the 40s and they're scoring all these points. I don't think the Bills really want to get into that kind of a shootout again. So I think both teams are going to try to limit possessions each other, thus being deep into games with, like, I could see a 10-10 game at halftime, 13-13, some scenario to where they're both trying to limit what each other are doing. I still think that it's so hard to predict, like, these games where you've already in the tournament, like, I don't care what anybody says, are tough games. Detroit has a whole division going for them. They still have very much in the 1 seed battle. The Bills have like an outside shot to if you finally think the Chiefs lose 2. I don't. I think the Chiefs probably drop 1 game down the stretch, possibly in a world there's 2. But ultimately the Bills need to go into the playoffs as healthy as humanly possible. How much can you care about the 2 versus 3 seed? That's still something that every team's going to talk about ad nauseum. So the Bills need to, in my opinion, I think they're going to stretch the issue of short, quick passes, play a lot of man. Josh Allen's really good against man, get first downs with his legs, just went for 80 plus yards. He's having a great productive rushing year again. I just need him to be healthy, man. I just need this roster to be healthy more than anything, especially going into these 3 very winnable AFC divisional games. and the Bills can pretty much get what they need done in those 3 games. But you would like to go into those 3 games off of a win and with a shot at the 1 seed and pretty much the 2 in hand. Just like he mentioned, they're going to be rooting for the Steelers. We're going to be rooting for the Eagles for the 2 seed battle. But so that's what's going to make this a little bit more interesting, as they're playing at the same exact time. So you got a Fox game of Eagles, Steelers. Then you got another notch up on the game. You got Bills Lions on CBS. So you got quite a slate that unfortunately Bills fans, we're going to have to miss most of the other one, because that's a dang good game. And we're going to probably get bad primetime games, but we're going to have to miss that one, which is unfortunate, because we got Raiders Falcons on Monday Night Football. Ugh. Bears Vikings. That's terrible too. That's disgusting. At least we got 49ers Rams is a pretty decent game. But those other 2 primetime games are brutal, especially for having these 2 games in the same time slot. That's just unfortunate as the Bills are going forward. But Kevin, bring us into score predictions. And we'll get Pat up here to give his score prediction, but we're going to start with you. We're going to go to Pat, and then we'll end it on me.
Real quick, before we do that, I have 2 things. One, Pat did confirm that, so I have it right here. Gibbs and Montgomery are the first duo in NFL history each with double-digit rushing touchdowns in consecutive seasons. So Montgomery has 12, Gibbs has 10. That being said, I got to ask you this before we give our score predictions, because I asked Pat at the beginning of the show, and now I want to ask you. Do you think that there's a scenario where the Bills could use Dorian Williams more this Sunday, considering how tough of a matchup this is? Now, the thing that I'll say is, I know that it's Matt Milano, but at the same time, he's not the same Matt Milano. He's not the same all-pro top 5 linebacker right now at this moment. And I think they're trying to get him ramped up for the playoffs. So do you think, I'm not saying that they should bench Milano, but do you think that they could at least sprinkle Dorian in a little bit, maybe play a little bit 4-3 with 3 linebackers? Or do you think it's just going to be heavy nickel the whole game?
4-3, 0% chance. 0. I don't know what would have to happen to see a 4-3. So that's completely out. As far as taking some from Milano, 10% chance that could happen. I mean, if the Bills are really worried, I mean, that's sending a message though, Kevin. That is saying that in a game where all you're playing for is seeding. That is completely true. Like, the Bills are not playing for anything, but hopefully maybe having a shot at 1 and really locking down the 2. They're not playing for an overall amount of stuff. I mean, it is what it is. Like, we can try to fire McDermott after losing to the Rams if we want. But ultimately, like, if you look at what's at stake, I don't think you take him off the field to try to ramp him up for the playoffs. If you make that move, that's a move you're making now. Like, you're making that move, making Milano a backup. So, I mean, anything's possible if they really looked at his film and said, you know what, we're going with Dorian. I don't believe that's just a snap move here, snap move there. I mean, I think that's a full, like, swapping of the players at that stage. If they do that, I mean, it's not out of the question. I don't think there's any % chance at a 4-3 unless, like, literally in the 4th quarter, the Bills cannot stop a single run. I mean, with if Rapp's out, it could make things interesting to where you can get tricky with who you have on the field in general, but they're not taking Taron Johnson off the field. So if there's another tricky way to do it with that injury, possibly I could see it, but the Bills just do not do that often. One of the only times I reference is that great win game of the New England Patriots. You don't see McDermott get Taron Johnson off the field ever. So that gets tricky with who would come out. Rapp could make that interesting if he's unable to go. But outside of that, you could bench Milano. It's possible. Like, there is a world they do that, but I don't think it's like he plays pass downs, he plays run downs. They want Milano to take all the snaps. And if there's a major issue, if they make that move at some point in the game, say in the start of the 3rd quarter, you're benching Milano at that point. You don't swap him in and out, in my opinion. So that's kind of what
for the most part. The last thing I'll say real quick is I just think that Dorian deserves more than 0 defensive snaps, because he did not play any defensive snaps this past Sunday, and the Bills were getting gashed. Again, I'm not saying that they have to bench Milano, make him a backup, or demote him of any means. I just think sometimes sprinkle him in, mix it up, whether it's 1st down, 2nd down, 3rd downs. Yeah, you're probably going to want to keep Milano out there, especially when it's a passing situation. But if it's like 3rd and short, 4th and short, I might think about putting Dorian out there. I mean, this guy was almost leading the league. He was 2nd in the league in tackles I can't remember exactly what week it was, but,
tackles isn't a good stat of how you're playing, though, man. Like that's not a good stat. It's like the worst stat of stats. Like I'd rather you talk about like rush stats than like tackles. Like that's one of the worst. Dorian Williams stinks. I don't think he's very good at football. I could see
he doesn't stink.
I don't think
he's not great,
good.
But he can at least defend the run a lot better than some linebackers can.
He's one of the biggest pass liabilities, in my opinion. So, like, the biggest thing is, like, you don't know, like, against a team like the Lions, what they're in, right? So you don't know if they're running or passing. Like, you could assume they're going to run here. So let's have Dorian Williams in the game to stop the run. But they see Dorian in the game, and now they're seeing you, like, do this weird rotation. Ben Johnson's going to remember that, and they're going to know. They think we're going to run here. Jared Goff goes to the line, taps his helmet. And they make an adjustment. So that's the issue that you'll have with doing like a switch of linebackers. You could just bench Milano. I'm not saying you're saying that, but I'm saying that you can bench Milano and put in Williams full time. That's sure within the realm of possibilities.
I don't want to do that.
Then yeah, I wouldn't envision. The Bills don't play a 4-3, unfortunately. I think he's such a liability in pass coverage that you can't play him. He's got some flashes against the run. He is poor against the pass. And maybe this is a game you could try to get away with it, but then you look at their pass weapons with Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown over the middle. And I don't know that you can get away with him in this game. But down the stretch, you could see him definitely in these 3 AFC games, I guess. But those may be the games where you want to get Milano reps. So I don't really know how they're going to play it. But you could certainly say, Dorian is definitely going to give us an advantage against a team that can really run the ball. Unfortunately, Milano's going to sit this game, and then we'll see him in the next 3. I don't think that's crazy to assume, but it's definitely not going to be like a switchy swappy, because Jared Goff's going to recognize, just like Josh Allen would, like they're doing this weird rotation by like the third play that they do that. He's going to start calling, checks and hurries, and he's going to target that player, because then now you're telling the team what you're in too. Now you're saying Dorian's in, we may have a run blitz called. Dorian's in, let's run a quick slant, let's run tight end option, let's run a tight end corner, let's do these things because they think we're going to run the ball. So it just unfortunately, the way the tell of it is unfortunately not able to as much as you could with like a defensive tackle where guy needs a blow, so you're able to do it that way. But I don't see the linebacking rotation. But I mean, ultimately, I don't really mind. It's a business. You're paying Milano a lot of money. You need him to get back to form. And Dorian Williams is a liability in coverage. And how much of that are you willing to oversee based on his run stopping ability? That's on Sean McDermott to tell you, but that would come with a Milano basically saying in this game against the Lions, you're going to see almost all Dorian Williams. They could do that on a 1-game basis. I wouldn't be totally shocked. But I don't believe that's the way that they'll go.
Yeah, I just think he's big, strong, and athletic in the sense that he can get after these running backs and he can shoot those gaps. But I guess we will we'll have to wait and see how McDermott decides to play it out.
It's not crazy if they want to go to him for the entire game, though. I don't think it's totally crazy to assume that they'd be like, Dorian's going to give us a better chance in this matchup. I mean, it is conceivable to assume that. Pat, we're gonna be talking about the score predictions here. So Pat, we're gonna get you on for some score predictions, but Kevin, bring us home with a score prediction first. We'll get into Pat, and then I'll bring us to the table.
This is a one time this season that I'm going to pick against the Bills. I just don't think that they have what it takes because the Lions do present a huge challenge. And we were just talking about the linebackers and the run defense and coming off of that shaky performance last week. I think that the Lions are going to duplicate it. And I just don't know if the Bills have the answers. Again, I've been talking about Dorian all night. I love the way he flies around the field. So I think that could be an option. But to your points, Kevin, I mean, are the Bills going to think the way that I'm thinking? So I just think that the Lions are two-dimensional. Even if they do, they can attack them in the air. I think that the Bills offense will be cooking again, especially with Coleman and Kincaid back, but the Lions are just a tough challenge. I think it will be close though. So I am going Detroit 34, Buffalo 31.
So I'm going 3-1 to finish the season, I'm assuming, and ending at 13-4. So, which would
basically
be a good a 2 seed.
I see
13
that the
and
Bills
4
are going to win out. You know how they finished on winning streaks each of the last few seasons. I think this is going to be a mini 3-game win streak. And they're going to get some momentum. Maybe you see, like we were just talking about, Matt Milano. That's a good time to ramp him up against those division opponents. Maybe Micah Hyde, Kareem Jackson, Lewis Seen, guys like that. But for this game, I just don't know if they have what it takes yet. So I'm going Detroit over Buffalo.
Okay, there you go. And that would be a good chance to beat a 2 seed if they do go 3-1. Pat, what do you got going forward in this Lions game? Do you have them losing back-to-back twice this year, or do you have them overcoming after the Rams game?
I do have Buffalo winning 37-34. I do think that this game will come down to if Buffalo can stop Detroit's rushing attack. Obviously, they have 2 really good running backs, and if they can't slow down Detroit's running back, they're going to be in for a long game, just like how we saw against the Rams, especially if Rasul Douglas does not play, because guys like Jameson Williams then will get open, or Amon-Ra St. Brown, whichever one Christian Benford's not covering.
I think those are all fair points. So obviously, then you would have them. Do you have them going 4-0 to finish?
Yes.
Okay, so definitely the 2 seed in my opinion. Any chance at the one? Okay, go ahead.
I have them losing the last game of the year because I feel like they will be benching their starters.
Yeah, I could see that. I absolutely could. That could be true. That would be with the notion that the one's out of hand and that you have the 2 locked. If they have the 2 locked up and the one out of hand, you're right. I think that that New England game at the end of the year in New England, it's a good time to not play anybody, especially if you don't have the bye. You got to use that game as the bye. So I agree with you. That's going to be a tricky one. If you're right, if they beat the Lions, I could definitely see the Week 18 loss. I think that's a good take. I came into this going to pick the Lions in this game. I was pretty sure that the Bills would lose this game coming off of a Rams win. I just don't think that statistically they lose very much off of a loss. They've only done it a few times, once being this year. Josh Allen specifically, and even Sean McDermott, they don't lose much off of losses and off buys. Their number, I think it's 3 losses off of losses, and never 3 straight. So I was pretty sure I was going to pick the Lions. I think the Bills want to show people that, like, look, yes, we lost to a good Rams team that was desperate, that could win their freaking division. Like, that Rams team definitely, we played all 4 of them. That Rams team is the best of those 4. I mean, we lost to them, but if they play like that, like, that is easily the best Rams team. But they got to clean things up defensively. Their defense was poor too, in my opinion. So we'll see how that plays out. But they're definitely better than that Seahawks team. And we'll see how that hurt 49ers. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I have the Bills winning in this game because I have them. But I agree with you; they're going to lose again. That is, I do have that take. I have them going 3-1 in this. Whether they lose to the Jets or the Patriots, I think it's going to be the Patriots at the end of the season because everything's locked up. The Bills need to have a bye, period. They can't be playing Week 18 for the division, for a seed. The only way the Bills play Week 18 is if they win these 3, and then the Chiefs lose at least 1 game of the first 3 games. Denver, they play at the end. That's going to be a tough game for them. They do have 3, Houston, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. They need to lose one of those or the Bills will rest their players Week 18 with the bye pretty much in hand. This game gives the Bills the affordability to maybe rest their players Week 18, and I think that they're going to go out and take that. The Bills are going to show people that Josh Allen does not lose in domes. Is this a retractable roof? I don't even know what Detroit is.
No, it's not. It's a dome.
It's a full dome, right? Okay.
Yes.
So the Bills win. Josh Allen does not lose in full domes. Look, he's coming off of it. He's trying to keep his MVP performance. Josh Allen wins this game. He's the MVP. He is the MVP if he beats this game. It's going to be too much on the line for the Bills, where I don't know how much is going to be on the line against New England, New York. It's like you have my opinions already about the Rams game of them being like, meh, they played the Rams in LA. I was actually thinking I almost picked the Rams last week on this show, and I said, I don't think so. Because I figured that game, and I did pick a 3-point game, but I did figure that the Rams had a ton to play for. Us going out west, and Josh Allen admitted it. He's like, yeah, we went up pretty far west. We had everything on the line. This is what it was. The Bills aren't going to do that again. It's not a very far trip. They're coming back with their full offense. I got the Bills winning in this game here. 34-27. I just think they get it done, and they will make another stop than they need to. And Sean McDermott's going to show that, like, we can get this thing done, and the Bills are going to go flying high. Josh Allen wants to be the MVP. The way to be MVP, his next best odds, actually, you got Saquon Barkley, and then you have Jared Goff, actually, tied in the third spot of the MVP voting at minus 1,000. Or plus 1,000, excuse me. So, like, ultimately, I don't know. You got Josh Allen minus 400. You got Saquon Barkley plus 450, and then you got Lamar and Jared plus 1,000. So he goes and he beats the third MVP right now at this stage with what he's been doing. He's the MVP. So, guys, that's why I think that Josh is going to go and get it done. And they're going to do just enough defensively to keep them just under 30 points. And ultimately, I don't mind if each team tries to limit each other's possessions, because I think that's good for the Bills. I think the Bills don't mind that scenario where they're not this team that you think they are, where they need all these possessions and they score all these points. They love low possession games. They really do under Joe Brady. That is Joe Brady's mantra. It's different than Ken Dorsey. So that's what I got, guys. Kevin, any final thoughts?
Yes, I was actually just typing in our chat that I have one final stat.
Okay, let's hear it.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Let me just find the tweet real quick so I can read it word for word. Because the Bills offense, even though they haven't had that number one wide receiver, and they have, right? Because they acquired Amari Cooper, but the first few weeks they didn't have a number one. Then they did get Cooper. And then as soon as they got him, they started getting injury riddled with Coleman and Kincaid. So I guess maybe a better way to say it is they haven't had their full complement of receivers. But the stat that I found yesterday is that the Bills are the only team in the NFL to have 10 receivers who each have 150 plus receiving yards on the season. This is the first time in Josh Allen's career that he's had this many receivers with 150 plus yards. Not to mention 8 of them have more than 200, and there are still 4 games left. So I think between Allen and Joe Brady, they've done a great job of spreading the ball around and just giving them so many different options here at their disposal, where, like, you don't have to force it to Diggs anymore, or you don't have to feel like you have to throw it into this zone. I think that they're playing a lot more free, and I think that's been really opening things up for Josh and this offense.
There you have it. I don't think they've played together, right? They were close to playing together in Indy. Obviously Dalton Kincaid got hurt in Indy, but no Keon Coleman because he had gotten hurt in Miami. Did they all play in Miami, or were they all together for the Miami game? Was that the only time they've played together? The second Miami game, the whole complement.
Yeah, because that's when Poyer hit Coleman.
Yes,
Coleman hit Coleman in that game, and Wynn did, and then Cooper went out the next game.
Yeah, was Cooper hurt? I know they all
Cooper
played
hurt
in
Seattle.
So Cooper got hurt. So Cooper wasn't playing in that game.
No, that's right. He did not play against Miami.
So he didn't play. So they haven't had their full complement of receivers, have they?
No,
not really.
I
Curtis
guess that
Samuel's
Tennessee
banged up.
The Tennessee game
was like the only game. Yeah.
When
the Tennessee game was the only one.
Traded like 4 days prior, I guess. I think. Like, was that the only time they had all played together? At Tennessee game, then did Tennessee go into Miami? No, Tennessee, Seattle, right? So I guess
Tennessee into Seattle.
So Seattle, technically, they had everybody, right? They would have had everybody in the Seattle game, I guess.
I think
they did. I think
they rolled both of those games, Tennessee and Seattle, but they haven't had their weapons together much. And then obviously they lost Cooper, Kincaid, and Coleman between the Seattle block and the Miami hit. And then the Indy knee PCL for Dalton. So all three, they lost a player in each game back to back to back. That sucks. And some of them, they were missing 2 of the 3 in many games at least. So that was a challenging stretch for the Bills to lose their 3 best weapons minus Shakir. That's challenging. Matt Collins has fit in nicely though. So I'm excited. Matt Collins is a good backup receiver. Like, he has been like their best free agent signing. It's tough to say, but like all the other guys flopped. But Matt Collins finally came through for what we thought Trent Sherfield would be. But we just can't find that speedy guy like Deontay Hardy or Curtis Samuel. It just hasn't worked so far, but we'll see if there's more for Samuel. The Bills offense is better when it's going to the other guys, not Samuel. And we'll see what happens with their whole full complement of receivers. We'll see how much Hollins probably is going to get a dip. But if they're trying to run the ball, guys, you may still see some good amount of Hollins. It's going to be interesting to see how they play all these guys with this full complement of players. It's going to be a wild finish. The Bills' offense is back and ready to go. That's why I have them winning in this one. But I do think they falter. I do think they go 3-1. So Kevin, we all think they go 3-1. Down the
we all have them at 13-4.
So there we go. We all have them at 13-4, and we all have them in the 2 seed.
Yeah, because I think Pittsburgh's going to slip up at least once, if not twice.
So do I.
We need them to slip.
I think
up.
they'll
If we're
slip twice.
13-4. We need them to slip up twice.
I hate to say it, but like we really might be rooting for Kansas City on Christmas.
We might be, depending on where we're at. Depending on if they haven't slipped up yet, and if we win a couple games, it may be a little bit different. But yeah, if you're right, there's a world where that's going to be a really weird scenario. If they beat the Lions and then they beat the Patriots, I guess it's going to be different. But yes, off of a Lions loss, you're 100% right. We would be picking the Chiefs in that game if the Bills do not come out of this week. So we really appreciate everybody being here for 2 hours. Thank you so much from the Rams talk to the great Pierre and the guests for the Lions game. We'll be back at you next week. We're going to be breaking down this game and then into like a little luster of these Patriots games. But gotta play them. So thank you guys so much for coming on for a potential Super Bowl preview. We got a lot to go over next week to see what it looks like. But remember, it's just a regular season AFC NFC matchup. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. But we'll be back at you this time next week.
Go Bills.